All right, pardon the interruption, but we're back on English case marking. So we had walked through the first person pronouns, I and me, at least in subjective and objective case. For the third person pronouns, we mark, well, heretofore, English is always marked gender, so he, she, or it. And then we also mark case, so he is the third person masculine pronoun for singular speakers, or for singular individuals. In the subjective case, he knows them. Them is the objective for third person plural when you have more than one person you're talking about. You can flip that around to get they know him. So these are different forms is basically the point of this. We know her, she knows us. Her and she are the two pronouns for the third person feminine singular. We and us for first person plural, so on and so forth. I'm not going to bore you with all these details and just let you know that these pronouns change form depending on where they're appearing in the structure of the sentence, not necessarily in the order. However, word order is still constrained in English, so in theory you could kind of figure out what's the subject and what's the object of a sentence based on how the pronoun is marked. So you could say we know her, that's no problem, but you would never say her know we in English, even though you can figure out how that would work, or them knows he, so on and so forth. That would just be odd or in fact ungrammatical in English. But other languages are totally okay with that because you can tell it's a subject and object just by those inflectional affixes on the nouns or the pronouns. So in Russian, you can say something like "Я читаю книгу," which means I read the book. So "я" is I, "читаю" is read, and they also mark the verb in Russian with an inflectional affix to denote that I is the person speaking, and knigu has this ending "u" at the end, which means that it's the object of the sentence, whereas "ya" or I is the subject. So you can just switch around the order of the words because you can figure out what every element of the sentence is doing based on sort of these endings. So you can say "ya knigu chitayu," which means I the book read, or I read the book. Knigu ya chitayu, say if you wanted to emphasize the book in this particular utterance, you could say knigu ya chitayu. It just means the same thing. The word order doesn't matter. Kniga byla v komnate means the book was in the room, and I'm just showing you this because when the book is the subject of the sentence, it has a different ending, so it has the "a" instead of the "u." Kniga, knigu. Okay, we don't do that in English, but other languages are totally fine with it, and then it liberates them to do some other things that English does not. Okay, so that's that. Just so you know why we're talking about subjects and objects, I'm also going to walk you through some basic principles for building trees. These are tips that I'm going to give you with the idea that they will help you do tree building exercises and problem sets in the class. You don't absolutely have to follow these rules, but generally speaking, they're going to work. So the basic tip I'll give you first is to kind of write out, so I'm going to give you a sentence and say, show me what the syntactic tree of the sentence is. So the first tip I would give you is to write out each sentence independently, like at the bottom of a sheet of paper, and then identify the lexical category of each word. And then actually, so normally we think of a sentence as structured from the top down, but usually the easiest way to kind of figure out how the words fit together is to actually build up the phrase structure from right to left, from the end of the sentence to the beginning. And that seems a little bit funny, but once you see how it works, it'll start to make sense. Okay, so if you have a word, once you've identified the lexical category for each word, if you have a word of type verb, noun, adjective, or preposition, those are always going to have to project up to a phrase of the same type. So if there's a verb in there somewhere, there's going to have to be a verb phrase up at the top of that phrase. These are the heads of these types of phrases. A noun is going to project up to a noun phrase, so on and so forth. If you have an auxiliary, that's nice. It simplifies your job a little bit because that's always going to project up to a TP. These auxiliaries always fit in that T slot that heads the tense phrase. Oftentimes, though, you're not going to see an explicit auxiliary. You're not going to see an explicit marking of tense in an English sentence, so you just have to figure out what it is once you kind of get to the end of the process. Other lexical categories, which are not these content words like determiners, degree words, so on and so forth, those are primarily going to function as specifiers. So when you see them in a phrase, you know that they're just kind of going to line up as the specifier of the current phrase that you're thinking about. Okay, so when you work through the sentence from end to beginning, from right to left, if you encounter a word like a determiner or a degree word, so on and so forth, just include them as specifiers of your current phrase. But if you encounter a word which can form the head of a phrase by itself, like verb, noun, so on and so forth, the previous phrase that you've been playing around with is probably going to be a complement of a larger phrase headed by this new word. And so basically, to talk about it in a different way, let's say you start out with a noun at the end of the sentence, you know that's going to project up to a noun phrase. If you look to the left of that noun and you see a determiner, that determiner is probably just going to be a specifier of that noun phrase. So you haven't built up a new phrase at all, you just added something more to it. If you are at the end of the sentence, you have a noun, then you look to the left and you see something new like a preposition, then the noun is probably projecting up to a noun phrase that's a complement of the preposition in a new, bigger prepositional phrase. I'll show you some examples as we go, but basically you're deciding, is the new stuff you're encountering to the left, is it a specifier of the current phrase, or is the stuff to the right a complement of something bigger, which is moving to the left effectively? Again, it's better to show this than to tell you about it, so I'm going to stop talking about that now and show you in the practice exercises exactly how that works. I'm going to mention them as well, these phrase structure tests. If you are having trouble identifying maybe the lexical category of a word or the category of a phrase type, you can apply the 3 phrase structure tests that we talked about before. So if you think something is a noun phrase, you can substitute a pronoun for it. If you think something is a verb phrase, you can try substituting do so for it, so on and so forth. Or you can just take like a known noun phrase and say, does that work in this slot as well? If I know like explicitly something else is a noun phrase, can I put this here? Does that also work as a noun phrase? Then yeah, then what I'm working on here is also going to be a noun phrase. Movement, does the whole string of words work together by moving around to the same spot? Can you move it around to a different spot in the sentence? And then thirdly, our third test for phrase structure is coordination. Can you link it with a known phrase type? And you can only link similar phrase types with each other. So a verb phrase links up with coordinates with another verb phrase, so on and so forth. I'm going to give you a note on tenses. So there are only 2 tenses in English that are marked without an auxiliary preceding the verb. So these are the past tense, and we're going to mark that in that T slot with a plus past feature. So like dropped is explicitly marked here with this ed suffix, and then other verbs in English you might recall are irregular, so they show internal change when they go to the past, like ran or sang, watched, so on and so forth. These are all past tense verbs. If not, if it's in the present, you mark it with minus past, that feature specification. So I drop, he drops, you run, she runs, sing, sings, so on and so forth. This is just the present tense inflectional affix for third person subjects, third person singular subjects in English, but both of these are both of these are present. Sorry about that. For this class, if there's an auxiliary verb in the T slot, you don't have to put an explicit tense marker there because the auxiliary just kind of takes care of that. Otherwise, just choose between plus past and minus past. And again, I'm going to walk you through the practice exercises so we can see what that looks like explicitly. And I'll keep this these pairs of slides up here. Actually, probably this one is the most useful one in doing the practice exercises to give you a sense of how you can walk through the structure yourself. I'm going to stop there for now and then show you the answers to the practice exercises. So you should, at this point, know everything you need to know for the second set of practice exercises. You can try them on your own. In fact, I would recommend that you do that before you watch the next video, which is going to be me walking you through the answers and how to build out the trees. But that's going to be there in case you get stuck or can't figure something out. Okay, enough talking for now. Time to show you something.